Alright, making a video. Probably shouldn't, but Pyrrho just pisses me off. So I'm going to make a video about a couple of subjects, and maybe he can confine himself to those subjects. He's really difficult to listen to just because he does all this room stuff. Subjects are all over the place. There's no continuity to his content at all. And it just makes things very difficult. It's never one subject at a time. It's just a scattergun, shotgun approach, and just doesn't, it's not useful. So there's this idea of diagnosing where we are in the political realm, and he just says little offhanded things, stupid things like, well, maybe Trump's no worse than a some kind of moderate Republican or something. Does he think that there's something Trump will veto from the Republican House and Senate? What's he going to veto? What Republican legislation is Trump going to veto? None. There's nothing he's going to veto, and he's promised to ruin the courts. So it's a total perfect storm of shit. There's nothing. Trump is dead on social issues, because to put somebody who is against abortion on the Supreme Court is going to require him to put somebody who is likely anti-gay on the Supreme Court. All those things are going to be part of who that person will be. And then all the other, it's not just about the Supreme Court. He's going to be signing off on all these horrible judges, in the federal courts, and the Senate and the Congress are going to be doing that. So they're just going to load the courts full of these archaic religious kooks. And so that's going to be part of the disaster. That's the disaster we're living with now, where it's all a consequence of the first Reagan and then the Bushes, and these disasters take forever to fix. And then the liberals we put in are not liberals, and so they don't fix it. Clinton didn't fix it, and Obama didn't fix it. They just sign off on it. They just extend the Bush tax cuts or some other kind of crap. So what's the point? Yeah. But the issue I really want to get to is the immigration thing, because that's his dumbest of all possible stupid things to be arguing in this atmosphere. It just illustrates why he's a lousy progressive, because there's no discipline, there's no reason applied to, there's no logical continuity. You can't do what he wants to do. It can't happen in the world that exists, and he never wants to put actual horses in front of carts, ever. And you really have to do that. You can't, the reason why we're in this mess is because people aren't doing that. That's the biggest lesson we should have learned, is that nobody finances the nonsense. Reagan's shiny city doesn't exist. All that exists is the rich got really rich. So it only exists for the rich. It doesn't exist for anybody else. The trickle down was bullshit, and it was just piss. piss on the middle class until they melt into the poor, and that's all that took place. And that's the world we're facing. And it isn't even just the fact that we have lousy internal politics. It's that the world has changed, and this is something Pyrrho just won't concede. And so he has this idiotic who just says this stuff like, I'm for open borders. And then he thinks that other progressives could say, oh, well, that's stupid, but I can accept that. When everything leading to that, or anything I give to that in terms of a policy in that direction is catastrophic failure. You can't survive even inching in that direction. That's just saying we can just walk into a little bit of the quicksand. I mean, it's just a non-starter. So yeah, if you're going to be what is the definition of the progressives or the liberals, then I'm going to be looking for a moderate Republican, because I don't really have a choice, because what you're talking is death. Death to civilization. So anyway, I mean, there's obvious things you can say. Like I said, the world has changed. The fact is that you have to compete with low wages in the world, or you have to elevate the wages in the world. But it's a world economy, If you try to isolate yourself from the world economy, you'll pay a huge price for it in terms of your own ability to exploit the productivity of exploitation. And so you'll have to Stone Age yourself and accept that limitation. And you'll be a little bit like the Soviet Union in a sense that you're going to have a real degrade in your lifestyle. Although I tend to be for it, people aren't going to vote for that. So it's not a practical thing to argue for. So closing America isn't going to happen, as I think a fact. And so another thing that his whole thing is premised on is somehow we get all the money from the rich and we have all this money to give to people to, you know, fix the infrastructure and all that kind of crap. And that kind of crap doesn't get paid for by the rich. In the state I live in, they just increased the gas tax by 22 cents, 21 cents, whatever. Who pays that tax? It's not the rich. Okay, it's the working guy, the poor, everybody. That's a flat, regressive tax. The worse the worse your job is, the more you have to compute. The more you commute. The worse position you are in, you get penalized the most. And for what? For a tax cut for the rich. To abolish the inheritance tax. That was the trade-off. Brilliant. And now they're going to do some. They're supposed to do some infrastructure work. Well, it's kind of silly because most of the infrastructure isn't owned by the state. So it's owned by towns and counties. So what, is the money going to subsidize the towns and counties? Oh yeah, that won't happen in some sort of discriminatory manner. Not at all. No chance of that. I'm just saying it's just a totally unprogressive answer to the problem, and it's again financed by nonsense. Poor people are going to pay for it, and so poor people paying for poor people services. Does that make any sense? I mean, who's going to pay for the extra welfare, the extra medical care that you need to have open borders? Who's going to pay for it? Oh, we'll just tax the poor. They'll pay for it. So the poor people will pay the tax for the poor people services that they can't afford. And, well, I mean, that's how you end up with property taxes, that are more than people's Social Security checks. They can't afford to stay in their own houses anymore. They can't retire in their home because the property tax is going to drive them out. And it's because of these kind of liberals that's the reality. So, they're not my side. And again, in the world we live in, it's just so obvious. You can't have this expectation that you're going to blend bad systems with good systems and the result will be a good system. It's always a fact that if you put the bad gas in the good engine becomes bad. And that's what you're going to get for this. You're just importing people who don't understand what civilization is and don't really care. That's not going to work. But anyway, there's the real practical argument is the one about the fact that the world has changed. Pyrrho keeps thinking that immigration was some brilliant thing, that it's just this wonderful thing that creates this wonderful melting pot. And the only way it did that in the past was by absolutely exploiting the immigrants. The immigrants were brutalized and exploited overtly and completely. They were given no hospitalization, no social services, no welfare whatsoever. They died, okay, and they worked in sweatshops, and their kids worked in sweatshops, and that's a fact of immigration in America. And so of course it was profitable under those circumstances. But we're not going to go back to those circumstances, and no one wants to. Nobody wants to create a subclass in America that gets paid $3 an hour. I don't think. And I certainly don't think regular laborers don't understand that means they won't have a job. We're already underemployed. Probably 100 million people in this country don't have viable employment. And Pyrrho's talking about let's import more people because it somehow makes jobs. It doesn't make jobs. The jobs don't exist anymore. The jobs are in China, and they're not coming back until you lower your wages as low as the Chinese wages, and that's just a fact. And it wasn't NAFTA that destroyed the wages, because the wages were always NAFTA just meant that you have a trade agreement. It just facilitates the migration, but the migration is going to happen anyway. And at least with NAFTA, you get some guarantees about the security of the investments, so they can't just nationalize them. They're not, and you have some guarantees regarding the purchase of American products. So at least you get some export rights. And without it, you would just have the cheap labor without the export, obligations. So, but I'm not saying I'm for the agreement. I'm not saying I'm for NAFTA. But if you think being anti-NAFTA means you're pro-labor, the two things don't go together. Because being pro-labor means you're not going to allow the degrade of the wage base by having a stupid notion that there's a zillion jobs available and that there's no real problem here. There is a real problem. The world has, in fact, changed. Machines have made human beings useless and disposable. And that's the fundamental argument that Pyrrho doesn't get. He just keeps arguing that human beings are wonderfully talented things and they're always useful and valuable, when in fact many of them are sick and disabled, stupid, dysfunctional, with all kinds of psychological problems. And that's what the world is creating right now. It's no one's building good nests to lay eggs in, and all the eggs are coming out a little bit frickin' crooked. There's no healthy chicks being born anywhere in this world. They're all being kind of born to stupid and horrible circumstances in slummy areas of the world. That's where all the population growth is. We know that 70% of the most intelligent people have no population growth. They don't have the 2.3 children. They're almost in a negative population state, in the sense that there's no, they're way below replacement population in terms of their contribution to the pool. They're anti-natalist essentially, without admitting it. They don't see great promise, they don't see great opportunity, and they realize that they're not doing somebody a favor by throwing him into a shitty world. And maybe Pyrrho has to keep justifying his perception that he could keep doing that and he can keep investing in some kind of world that doesn't exist. But it's totally impractical. It's totally corrosive to the politics. If being a progressive means I have to raise my hand and say yes to some kind of notion of an open border, which is just insane for 9 million reasons. And he says stupid things like, oh yeah, but we could still check people for tuberculosis or some contagious diseases. Or no one's going to have the money to do all of that. You're not going to be able to do that at any frickin' open border, unless you put a hotel by the open border and people can stay there for a week. You're going to quarantine them? It's just absolute nonsense. But that's all he talks, is this kind of nonsense, and for what and why. So you have to just wonder, why is it so important for him to keep saying this, even though he knows, at minimum, I would find it a non-starter. That should bother him, that I'm so against it that I'll do nothing with you. I mean, I don't want to associate, I don't even want a piece of any kind of notion like that to rub off on me as if I defend that. It looks like it's almost like not hanging out with the Klan, like not eating dinner with them. It's so obnoxious to what needs to happen in America for the world to get better. The America falling apart means there's no chance of the world getting better. America has to get stronger for the world to get better. And it's not going to be stronger if it's spending all of its money to take care of the entire disabled population of planet Earth, because that's what will happen by practical fact. Everybody who wants a better death will go to America. Everybody who wants to have kids on welfare will go to America. It just can't work as a practical matter. You just can't open the borders because there's people living in absolute shit, and they'll move here to shit on us because it's less shitty. And so they'll just move to a new location and shit there instead, because it'll be cleaner. until they shit it up. That's just the truth, and he wants to ignore it. And because we're going to give them all great jobs. But we're not going to be able to give them all great jobs. The only thing you can create with extra people now are slums. You can't create anything else. There's no there's no seller's economy here. It's over until you fix the other countries that have their people living in squalor and shit. So you can't fix it by just saying something here like we're just going to make some jobs, because they won't be productive jobs. And the only way a job can justify itself is it has to do something productive. And like I said, even the idea that we'll have a bunch of immigrants come here and fix our infrastructure. Well, they're going to unemploy the people that are already here, because again, there's all kinds of employment pressure. And that's why wages are as low as they are. It's because there's so much pressure for people to say, I'll do it for $1 less, I'll do it for $1 less, because there's real desperation. Most people now probably have a job that they don't want to do because of it's overtly almost illegal. I get tons of calls from solicitors all the time. I don't think any of those people want the job they have where they read some script and harass people for money. But that's the only way to make money, is to steal it now. The only industry in America is thief. Most people are just selling some kind of crap. These aren't real jobs. These aren't valuable jobs. So there's already a huge shortage of jobs that people are so desperate that they'll take some job selling solar panels or doing some other crap. It's crap. But that's the only job in town. So anyway, it's just obnoxious. He just keeps bringing it up and bringing it up and bringing it up. It's like you're not going to win an election ever in the future, in the next 40 years or something. That just ain't going to sell, because working people know they're being choked out of their wages. They're being strangled out of them by all these desperate people. People who come from some place where you have to eat dirt mixed in with shit, and they've learned how to do that because they've had to. And people here are saying, well, no, I like to have actual food in my food. And you're telling them, tough shit, learn how to be poor again, learn how to be desperately poor again, because fuck civilization, I'm going to ruin it with a dopey notion that somehow immigration works in a country with social services. And he says some kind of shit like, well, you just make the social service system blah blah blah. You can't do that, because that requires you to tell people that have cancer tough shit. That forces you to sit there and say, oh, you're dying? Well, you're not covered. You have no health insurance. So fuck you. Do it outside. That's not an answer. We either have a civilization or we don't. And you can't play this game that you can just say, let everybody in and we'll still have a civilization. Because we won't. Because realistically, it's just not practical to say, yeah, we're just going to sit there and let the immigrants die in the street. We're just going to let them die in somebody's front lawn. Because that's the implications of what you're saying. That's what has to happen. We'll just leave them homeless and with no services. Well, I mean, it's just stupid. I mean, it's idiotic. And if that's what progressives are going to cling to, then yeah, I can't call myself a progressive. I'll call myself something else again. I always have to sit there and separate myself from imbeciles, because that can't win. It won't win. So you'll always be a loser if you're going to poison the party with idiotic agenda. And again, if you just keep saying it, I don't care if you believe that's where we should go in the future, fine, but shut your fucking mouth about it. Because as soon as you let me know what your game is, I'm going to say I ain't going to play your game, because I know that's death. I don't want to import bad culture. I don't want to import religion. I don't want to import things that are just toxic to what is, like I said, a civilization requires. And what a civilization requires is that there's some people that take responsibility for their life, and it also requires some understanding that the world has changed, and in this country, just having two strong arms ain't good enough. You have to have a brain that has some sort of knowledge that makes you a skilled worker and all that kind of crap. And even then, there's still a limited number of jobs available. And that's a fact of the way the world is shaped. So, again, we can all live as owners maybe. Maybe we can all sit here and all have shares in the exploitation of the Chinese. And many Americans are doing that. They're living off the income they derive by exploiting labor all over the world, and that's where most of the wealth in America comes from. There's not too many good choices here because of the way the game is shaped. And until you change, you have to do things that are going to change the shape of the world, not things as stupid as saying, well, we'll just let the world's problems flood into America and everything will be just fine. So it won't. Yeah, it just won't work. Not a chance. It'll just poison America. It'll just make America sick, as the rest of the third world countries. We'll just become a third world country for certain. We're already most of the way there, but you know, that's what's going to happen. People won't want to come here. This will be so much. It'll be so shitty. Yeah, so you'll end the threat because America becomes so shitty. Yeah. So I mean, what progressives got to talk about is sustainability. They got to talk about paying bills, not getting into debt, you know, not doing stupid things, and having an earned economy. Maybe I think that's a much better sell to a working man as an argument. The mass populace is to argue for an earned economy, you know, instead of an inherited ownership, instead of a monarchy. And what you're arguing for is just makes us all more exploitable. And frankly, and part of me almost says, I hope you get what you deserve here, because you know, you keep talking this shit, and sooner or later it's going to hit your home. Sooner or later it'll reach your state. Sooner or later it'll reach your job category, and then it's going to be too late to complain. So, good luck, asshole.